All right, we are all very much awake down here, and we're already got this set up. We needed a bit of a technical intervention because our resident scientist isn't really residing here. He's in Oxford, which is where he works. It's Ilke Spaak. He does research in neuroscience, but also has a background in artificial intelligence, and he can tell us all about, or the basics of what the announcement of Google DeepMind is all about, and then going into StarCraft AI. So what we're going to do is going to switch to Ilke Spaak. We'll see him via satellite, listen to his presentation, and afterwards there may be some questions from the audience or from me. So enjoy the presentation. It'll be about 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Ilke, take it away.
All right. Hello, good evening, Alphen on the Rhine. How's it going? Well, so I'm going to be telling you a little bit about an announcement that was made by Blizzard and Google DeepMind about a month ago that could very well result in something you hopefully now see on the screen in a few years, which will be a Dutch StarCraft League final, maybe between a reigning human champion and an artificial intelligence machine. But before I'll go into that, I have to show you my second title slide here, which is mainly just to make explicit that I'm not affiliated with Google DeepMind at all. I'm just a simple researcher here in Oxford. But I will be telling you about all the cool stuff that DeepMind is doing. So anyway, into the game. Basically, what happened about a month ago is that Google DeepMind, Blizzard Entertainment, they together made quite an interesting announcement in the field of artificial intelligence. Namely, they made an API, an application programming interface, to couple advanced intelligence bots with StarCraft. So you probably all know what Blizzard Entertainment is, but just very briefly, what is Google DeepMind? DeepMind is Google's artificial intelligence subsidiary that has as its mission to solve intelligence. That's what they say about themselves. It's located quite close here in London. And Frank and I thought it would be very interesting to actually talk to you a little bit about what this actually means. What has Google DeepMind now decided to do? So that's what I'm going to talk about these in these 10 minutes. To start with, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what came before. Actually, that's the majority of my talk. It's going to be a bit of history of AI, what came before, because that will actually help you to understand why it's actually quite significant what Google is now trying to do. And then after going into what they actually now announced, I'll talk a little bit about what is for the future. But first, what came before? So obviously, I don't have time to go into the full history of AI, so I'll just go into a little bit of highlights that will help you understand what's going on now. So one thing which you may be familiar with, or maybe not, is that in May of 1997 in New York City, there was a big match between the then reigning human champion of chess, Garry Kasparov, and IBM's Deep Blue computer, which is a chess computer. And actually, IBM Deep Blue won in a series of 6 matches. This was quite a shock to the chess world, because up to that point, people would have thought that actually chess is such a huge human ability, computers are never going to be able to beat humans at that. But in fact, this is what happened. In 1997, Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. Now, I'm going to try to give you some idea of how Deep Blue was able to beat Garry Kasparov, because understanding how it did that will also help you later understand why StarCraft is actually very interesting at this moment. So how Deep Blue works is actually like a very, very big brute force computer. Deep Blue takes the current state of the chessboard, and then it looks at all the possible moves it can possibly make at that point. And then for each of those possible moves, it then branches out further and says, if I were to do this, then what could I do after that? Etc., etc. So it builds up what's known as a search tree. It builds up this very huge search tree to try and brute force its way to the very best solution. After a lot of branching, it says, well, this is actually a board state in which I win, so I better take the path towards that board state. So that's how Deep Blue solves chess. It's very, very different from how a human does it. So there's 2 things I want you to kind of take away from this. First is this very much a brute force aspect to solving this problem of intelligence. And the second thing that's important here is that it was given very explicit information about the world in which it is. The world is in the chessboard. So it's explicitly told there's a pawn in this square, there's a king in this square, etc., etc. So those 2 aspects are important about why Deep Blue was solving chess the way it did. Now, I'm going to take a jump about 20 years to, I guess it was March of this year, March 2016. A very different board game. The board game of Go was kind of solved by artificial intelligence, and this time it was actually done by people from Google's DeepMind lab. So the lab we're actually going to be talking about for StarCraft as well. So Go is, in many senses, a much more complex game than chess because Go has so many possible board positions that there's no way that you could ever brute force them all. In fact, there are as many board positions in Go as there are atoms in the observable universe, or even more, I should say. But in March of this year, one of the champions of Go at the moment, Lee Sedol, was beaten by a series of very interesting matches by Alphago. That's the name of a system built by Google DeepMind. And this was, of course, very interesting and important for the Go community and for gamers in general. But for artificial intelligence, the development of AlphaGo, was important for a particular reason. That is that AlphaGo, Google's DeepMind system, it makes use of a technique known as neural networks. So, it also uses some of this tree searching, but a very important part of AlphaGo is a neural network. It's a technique in artificial intelligence that is modeled on the way that the human brain actually works. And a neural network, also AlphaGo's neural network, allows the artificial intelligence to recognize patterns in the world. So in this case, it allowed AlphaGo to recognize patterns in the world of Go state, to sort of make a judgment call on, this is a very interesting board position that I want to be in, this is a board position that I actually do not want to be in. In essence, using this neural network gave AlphaGo's artificial intelligence a kind of intuition about how Go should be played. So in that sense, it's very much more similar to how a human would solve the problem of Go. So it's much less reliant on this brute force. So in that sense, it's very different from how Deep Blue solved chess. In another way, it's still quite similar to how Deep Blue solved chess, because also AlphaGo was given very explicit information about how the board looks. There's a stone there, there's a stone there, there's a stone there. So in that sense, it was still quite similar. Now, to tackle the second aspect, again, people from Google's DeepMind went ahead and looked at a very different type of game, something like Space Invaders. They developed an artificial intelligence system that was able to play Atari games, and able to play them very well. And you might say, well, that's actually not so interesting, because if you can solve chess and Go, then what's the point of playing Atari? It's much easier, right? True. However, the crucial difference here is that this system, DQN as it's called, the system built by DeepMind, was not given explicit information about how the world looked. It was just given pixels on the screen. So there were basically colored pixels were given to a neural network, and the neural network had to generate instructions on how to move a joystick and push buttons. And just from that information, just the pixels and being able to control the joystick, it was able to learn to play lots and lots of different Atari games. And it was actually able to learn to do this very, very well. And I have a little movie clip here of this system playing Breakout, which is quite fun to watch. You can see it needs to learn all these things. So this is the neural network playing Breakout after just 100 practice runs. You can see it's not very good. In fact, it's quite shit. But it starts to become better and better. So after 200 practice runs, you can see it's doing all right. I mean, it's not too bad. And soon we'll see, after 400 training episodes, it's actually doing a pretty good job. This is probably how many people not playing this game time would play Breakout. And it's going to become even more interesting, because as soon as the network has done 600 training episodes, it's discovered the very best strategy that is possible to find in the game of Breakout. It basically just digs a tunnel at the edge of the game and makes sure that the ball is always going into that tunnel, and then make sure that all the blocks are destroyed from the top to the bottom. I don't know if you ever played this game, but this is obviously the best way to do it. So it was able to find that out just by looking at pixel values, and that's the crucial development here. So no explicit knowledge about the game, just pixel values on the screen, and the AI, the artificial neural network, was able to learn to do this game. And that brings me to talking about what Google now announced. What they did together with Blizzard is generate what's known as an API, an application programming interface, and that's nothing more than a piece of software that you can see is kind of the glue between an artificial intelligence bot on the one hand and the game, StarCraft 2 on the other hand. So what Google DeepMind wants to work towards, and this is all open source by the way, so it's not just DeepMind that's now working on this, anyone can work on this problem now. what they want to do is to just take the raw pixel values from a game of StarCraft, just one screen at a time, and generate commands, keyboard and mouse commands, just like a human player would, um, to be able to intelligently play the game of StarCraft. Hopefully, as good as, or maybe even better than a human. So another little video clip here about what this entails. So you can see here on the right is just a game of StarCraft going on. The end goal is to actually just take those raw pixel values as a human player would see it and generate commands. But as sort of a stepping stone, this new API will also be able to provide sort of parsed information about the world to an artificial intelligence agent. That's what you can see in the color codes on the left uh, that are being shown here. Uh, so this is going to be very, very different how current AI bots in StarCraft play the game, right? So you might be able to say, well, we have AI in StarCraft anyway, right? I can play against a computer. The answer, yes, you can. But the AIs that are now going to be developed are going to be very, very different because current AIs, they know the entire state of the game. They know explicitly there's a nexus there, there's a stalker there, whatever. And if they want to build something like mine or whatever, they can just say to the computer, okay, I now want to warp in a new stalker. Whereas these new AIs, they will have to learn the structure of the world completely from the visual input, exactly like a human would. So that's the big development that's going on now. Getting artificial systems that learn exactly like a human, that control the computer exactly like a human. So what does this mean for the future? Well, the first thing it might mean is what I started out with my title slide. We might have, and I don't think this is far-fetched, in a few years' time, we might actually have a reigning human champion playing a computer at StarCraft and actually having a hard time defeating that computer. I think that's very possible. But of course, this is more of a symbolic thing. More practically speaking, we could see professional players even practicing against AI, and actually, as soon as the AIs become so good that they're able to defeat any human, then the AIs might even be able to give very constructive feedback to human players to say, maybe you should work on that aspect of your game, maybe you should work on that aspect of your game. I see that that's going to be a very real possibility in StarCraft AI. This is also what we saw happen with chess. Professional chess players now practice against computers because computers are just so good. Of course, Google DeepMind is not primarily interested in StarCraft. Google DeepMind is interested in artificial intelligence. So why do they do this? What does it mean for the future of AI in general? Well, what we can see, kind of, I hope to give you some idea of this history of AI. What we see is that in the history of AI, the artificial intelligence tries to solve a very simple model world first. Then you try to make the world a little bit more complex. Then you try to build artificial intelligence to solve that slightly more complex world, etc., etc. So you start off with something trivial like tic-tac-toe, you solve it. Then it becomes more interesting with chess, you solve it. Then we try to solve a simplified version of StarCraft 2. That's what the API is now about. You solve it. Then you try to solve the real StarCraft 2. And as these model worlds become more and more complex and more interesting, and we try to solve these worlds, we try to produce intelligent behavior in these model worlds that are more and more complex. At some point, the model world will be so complex that it actually the step towards the real world is not so big anymore. And at that point, we may have solved intelligence in the real world. So that is kind of what I wanted to tell you tonight. And I thank you very much for your attention. And I'll gladly take questions if they're there.
Thank you, Ilke. That was an amazing presentation.